Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our program evaluation series. Our topic for today is Title VI, Part B, the Rural Education Initiative. So here's our agenda. We will be going over the program evaluation series overview. Then we'll go into our statutory requirements, use of funding, the program evaluation process, and then we'll start going into closing with the CNA and CIP link. And lastly, we will cover a few resources. So with the program evaluation series, we're going to cover briefly what it is, how many we actually have within this series, and why we are in fact offering this opportunity. So here is the series description, which has been on our flyers and it's been on the website, and I'm assuming you've seen this before. In short, the definition, or if I'm going to sum up the actual series description, we have to do program evaluations for each one of the federal programs which we receive federal funding for. So the intent and purpose of this program evaluation series is to make sure that we are providing opportunities to get a deeper and further understanding of what specific pieces of the statute are out there based on the federal program, and then in turn what specific eval pieces are required in the statute, and how I generally evaluate the program itself. So there were 9 in this series. We started back on May 17th, and that covered our Title I Part A. And we are concluding today with Title VI Part B, which is the Rural Education Initiative. We are offering this because we want to make sure that we allow plenty of opportunities to have access to information, specifically in regards to our program evaluations. With schedules being what they are, it makes it sometimes difficult to be readily available at all times, and we wanted to ensure that if there were ever any questions about a specific program, how I evaluated, the steps involved, and statute as pertains to that program, the federal program, that we had opportunity and a way for you to be able to go back and have a look and say, I just need to know about this, so I'm going to watch this piece of this webinar. So with the stat requirements, as with all of the federal funding requirements, if I want to see what specifically I am supposed to be covering or evaluating, or what's involved with that federal program, these legal or stat requirements are indicated in the provisions and insurances portion of your NCLB consolidated application. In short, with the program evals, what we're doing is having a look at what we set out to do at the onset, looking at our CNA. This is what we said we wanted to accomplish based on the needs in our comprehensive needs assessment, which then made it to our plan. What we actually did accomplish throughout this year, and then to what degree we accomplished it. So as with all things with evaluations, it has to be planned from the onset, which is why you hear quite a bit individuals mentioning or referencing your baseline data when referring to our federal program evaluations, because we need to be able to see this is where we started, this is where we ended, what happened in between, and is this data objective enough for me to be able to make a true recommendation of continuation of that specific strategy or action, or maybe saying, you know what, we need to modify it, or we don't need to do this at all. So with our baseline data pieces, typically it's collected from our comprehensive needs assessments, our improvement plans, be they the campus or the district plan, also your fund sources, so like our budget reports, data can be pulled from that as well. And as you're looking through this and engaging in this process, if you see that you don't have as much data as you would prefer to be able to objectively make decisions in regards to the program and continuing of it, this is the time, as you start looking forward to next year and planning for next year, that we say, okay, I need more data on this, or I'm noticing I have a surplus of data in this area, but nothing in this area over here. And with our data as well, just as a reminder, we want to make sure that it is not just quantitative in nature. As with all programs, there is an opportunity to involve qualitative data pieces, and that can include our surveys, it can include forums, it can include face-to-face one-on-ones. It does not and should not only be data that we collect from, say, our trend data from how our students did in STAR this year versus last year, or how they did on their benchmarks, if we're looking at locally created assessments. It does not have to always be, and it should not always be, just that concrete data that's academic based in nature. So with the NCLB stat requirements, and this is the general requirement, the applicant will adopt and use proper methods of administering each such program, including the enforcement of any obligations imposed by law on agencies, institutions, organizations, and other recipients responsible for carrying out each program, and the correction of deficiencies in program operations that are identified through the audits, monitoring, or evaluation of the program. Now, I do want to say that within the program evaluation booklet that I'll show you, it's on our site, of course, region10.org/Title1, and it is also on our TEA site. There is not a piece that comes directly or that's in there that specifically speaks to, under NCLB, our Title VI Part B, that Rural Education Initiative. However, on our TEA site, it does have additional requirements and overviews specifically for this grant and for this federal funding. So just be aware, when I take you to the booklet at the end, when we start wrapping up and looking at resources, you won't see Title VI Part B in that cumulative NCLB book that we utilize here in Texas. And it's just not there, but I will show you where you can pull that program evaluation tool and add your program evaluation specifically for Title VI in there. So straight from our agency site, the Rural Education Achievement Program, also known as REAP, of the ESEA, as amended by NCLB, assists eligible LEAs in addressing local academic needs more effectively by giving them greater flexibility in the use of limited federal resources. Programs under subparts 1 and 2, and we will go into those subparts, are designed to address the unique needs of rural school districts that frequently lack the personnel and resources to compete effectively for federal competitive grants, and 2, receive formula allocations in amounts too small to be effective in meeting their intended purposes. So with the Small Rural School Achievement Program, which is subpart 1 in Title VI Part B, they help our rural LEAs use federal resources more effectively, which is kind of a repeat of what I just showed you. But the purpose of it is to improve the quality of instruction and increase student academic achievement, because of course we're talking federal funding, which means student academic achievement is the primary goal in this. Eligibility under that Small Rural School Achievement Program, which is the subpart 1, for LEAs, you're identified in one of two ways. The first option is our LEA's total number of students in their average daily attendance is less than 600. Or 2, each county where the LEA administers a school has a total population density of fewer than 10 persons per square mile. So those are the only two ways that we can be eligible for this subpart 1, which is the Small Rural School Achievement Program. Additionally, the LEA serves campuses that must be designated with the school locale code of 7 or 8 as determined by the USDE National Center for Ed Statistics. Now, subpart 2 of this, the Rural and Low Income School Program, is a formula grant. And with the formula grant, this particular one provides financial assistance to rural districts to meet local academic needs. The RLIS funds a variety of activities and does include teacher recruitment and professional development, support for educational technology, parental involvement activities, and more. So as soon as you see this, one of the things that should pop in your mind is coordination of funds, because this does, with the teacher recruitment PD, this is smacking right into your Title II. So when you see things like this, of course, we start thinking, if I know already that this particular grant funding source is smaller as compared to our other title programs, how can I coordinate funds to make my money go further, stretch further, biggest bang for my buck kind of concept. So with this subpart 2, eligible LEAs are those where 20% or more of the children serve ages 5 through 17 years are from families with incomes below the poverty line. And that poverty line is based on federal guidelines. And 2, designated with the school locale code of 6, 7, or 8 as determined by the USDE National Center for Ed Statistics. As a side note, RLIS funds are available only to LEAs that do not qualify for SRSA funds. So with this, if I don't qualify for subpart 1, which is the Small Rural School Achievement Program, then I can qualify for the Rural and Low Income School Program. I know we all know this, but just as a reminder, that means that I can only get or qualify for RLIS, the second part, where it's 20% or more children that served between 5 and 17 are from families who fall below that federal poverty guide threshold, if I am not eligible for the subpart 1. So going into the law, I'm going to split this up between subpart 1 and subpart 2. So part 1, again, the Rural School Achievement Program, and subpart 2, the Rural and Low Income School Program. So first, we're going to look at the program purpose of the Small Rural School Achievement Program. This is section 60. This is in section 6202, which is Title VI. This gives the general purpose of the program of Title VI, and then we'll break it down further. So it's the purpose of this part to address the unique needs of rural school districts that frequently, 1, lack the personnel and resources needed to compete effectively for federal competitive grants, and 2, receive formula grant allocations in amounts too small to be effective in meeting their intended purposes. This comes directly from Title VI, the statute. Now, to break it down a little further, subpart 1, we're going to look at eligibility, grant program authorizations, and then the accountability pieces of this. So with subpart 1, our grant program authorized says, in general, the Secretary is authorized to award grants to eligible LEAs to enable the LEA to carry out activities authorized under any of the following provisions. So Part A of Title I, Part A or D of Title II, Part A or B of Title IV, Title III, and then Part A of Title V. And just as a side note, an eligible LEA can redirect the use of any or all of the funds received under Title II Part A, which is your teacher and principal training and recruiting, Title II Part D, enhancing ed through tech, Title IV Part A, the safe and drug-free schools and communities, which we know is no longer fully funded federally, but if you have funding there, you can, local funding there, you can allocate it somewhere else. And then Title V Part A, which is considered innovative programs. So I can transfer or redirect funds from those sources to carry out local activities in Title I Part A, Title II Part A. I can transfer it directly into Title IV Part A, Title IV Part B. I can transfer money out of the Title VI, this rural ed, if I'm receiving it, into those title sources as well. So with this particular grant, you have a little bit more flexibility if you want to, and not that you can't transfer in other title programs, but with this one, it does directly come up, the idea or the notion of possibly transferring funds in or out of this because of just the amount of money or the amount of funding involved. It's typically not a lot. So they do give you the option of transferring funding out or in of this. So section 6213 covers accountability. And again, this is still just a subpart 1, the SRSA. So with our academic achievement assessment, because I have to be able to show that what we're doing with this grant funding is beneficial to our students, each LEA that uses or receives funds under this part has to administer an assessment that is consistent with section 11B3, which is overall accountability, making sure that we are assessing our kids when we are supposed to assess them and that they are performing academically where we would like for them to be. So with accountability, we still have to say in our local plans here that we are keeping administrative or administering assessments along the same requirements that meet the requirements in other parts of the statute. with determination regarding continuing participation, because there is, this grant does have a time limit to it, but each state education agency that receives funding has the ability to, or shall, which in legal term means you will, it's a must here, after the third year that an LEA in the state participates in the program, and on the basis of the results of the assessments, the state can determine whether or not that LEA participating in a program made what they consider to be adequate yearly progress, which is spelled out in section 1111B2. In addition, the state has to look at that LEA and permit only LEAs that participated and made adequate yearly progress, allow them the option of continuing to participate after those 3 years. And then section 3, permit those LEAs that participated and failed to make adequate yearly progress to continue to participate only if that LEA uses applicable funding other this subpart to carry out the requirements. So this program has a lifespan, if I'm looking at it from an LEA level, of 3 years. At the conclusion of that 3 years, that's when the state has to make determinations as to whether or not I, as an LEA, can continue to be a part of this program and receive funding, or if, because I did not make adequate yearly progress based on guidance spelled out in the statute, I can, not be allowed to continue, or be allowed to continue with conditions. So going into subpart 2, which is the rural and low income school program, we're going to look at the same things. We're going to look at some eligibility pieces, some authorizations of the grant pieces, and then accountability pieces. So with subpart 2, which is the rural low income schools, the RLIS, the program authorized with eligibility, an LEA shall be or will be and can be eligible to receive this grant if 20% or more of the children ages 5 through 17 that are served by this LEA fall under the federal poverty guideline threshold. And B, all of the schools served by this agency are designated with a school locale of 6, 7, or 8 as determined by the agency, which is a PEAMS thing. So with award basis, a state educational agency shall award grants to eligible LEAs on a competitive basis. That's one of the things about this grant that sometimes people see as a downfall of it, because this is not a formulaic grant, it's competitive. B, according to a formula based on a number of students and average daily attendance served by the LEA, or they can C, according to an alternative formula, if prior to awarding the grants, the state demonstrates that the alternative formula enables the state to allot greater funds in a manner that serves equal or greater concentration of children from families with incomes that fall below that federal poverty guide threshold. So these are the 3 options that a state has in regards to how I am actually going to provide funding. I can either do it competitively, I can do it as a formula, or I can come up with an alternative formula, as long as I can prove that this alternative formula is for the better good, or the better benefit of our kiddos who we are trying to serve, whose families' economic background will fall or put them below the federal poverty guideline threshold. Looking at applications in the RLIS, the state or the qualified agency who's receiving this grant has to turn in required information to the secretary. And that's basically going back to the state actually being able to evaluate the programs and turn in their data to the USDE. So as far as contents for the applications, at a minimum, we have to make sure that we're including information that addresses specific, measurable goals and objectives that are going to be achieved through the activities carried out in the grant. These may include specific ed goals and objectives relating to increasing student academic achievement, of course, decreasing student dropout rates, or 3, such other factors as the state or specifically qualified agency may choose to measure. So again, looking at this, decreasing student dropout rates, what comes to my mind automatically when I see this with coordination of funds again is our state comp ed, if that's something that you have access to specifically for our secondary kiddos, because there is funding allowed with that as well. So we want to look at how I can coordinate and more effectively use the funding that I'm receiving from the federal side, because this Our rural ed initiatives, the funding is very small versus the funding that we could be getting from our state allotments. So in RLIS, subpart 2, the next piece we're going to hit on is the accountability piece. I kind of mentioned this before, like briefly, that the state has to turn in a report to the USDE. So from the state perspective, they have to submit a report annually. And in that report, they have to include the method that they decided to use the grant funding to award to LEAs, to eligible LEAs, and to provide assistance to schools. They also have to include in a report how the LEA and schools use this funding, and then the degree to which progress has been made toward meeting the goals and objectives. So this is part of the reason why this report has to be submitted annually, and I'll show you at the end of this what it looks like in the e-grant system. But this is part of the reason why we have to submit this information to the state annually, because the state in turn has to submit their reports annually to the USDE. Now this portion here that talks about the report to Congress, I'm not going to go into this because this is beyond what we typically cover, but I just wanted to point this out to you, just pieces of it, that once the information that we as LEAs turn into the state, they in turn use that information to fill out their report, and then from there, there is a report that's provided to Congress. So the academic achievement assessment piece here, same as what we've already covered. We do have to show that we are making academic achievement based on statute, based on what we have as really as a state deemed to be the minimum academic achievement that our kiddos should have. Determination regarding continuing participation. This is here as well. Each state education agency or qualified agency has the ability after the third year that an LEA or a specially qualified agency receives the funds to go back and have a look at them, basically to assess it again at the end of the 3 years. And they are going to be looking at in the case of an LEA, determining whether or not the LEA made adequate yearly progress, which we looked at before, or in the case of a specially qualified agency, submit to the secretary information that will allow the secretary to determine whether or not the qualified agency made adequate yearly progress as well. So with both the SRSA and then the RLIS, subparts 1 and subparts 2 of Title VI, there is always, of course, going to be an accountability system in there, and it goes back to academic achievement of our kiddos. Now, when determining participation with the rural low-income schools, RLIS subpart 2, the state has to basically come up with the guidelines as to how we're going to rate the progress. One of the things we have here is for continuing participation. It is permitted only those local, or for only those LEAs or specially qualified agencies that made the adequate yearly progress, and we permit those, or we do not permit those who fail to make adequate yearly progress. They have the option. If you're not making that progress that they have set up and stipulated, this is where we need to be, this is the progress that the students that you are serving and your LEA need to make, they have the option of discontinuing, and this is the same as SRSA, which is subpart 1. They can either say, yes, you can continue, you say, no, you cannot, or they could say, yes, you can, but with stipulations as far as receiving of the funding, continuing participation in the program. Now, subpart 3 talks about general provisions in Title VI, which is for the Rural Ed Initiative. And I mentioned the annual average daily attendance determination. This stuff is here as well. I'm not going to go into super detail on this. The only thing I did want to point out is the census information. Each LEA designing a grant has to, and also your specially qualified agencies, have to, not later than December 1st of each year, conduct a census to determine the number of students in your ADA from kinder through grade 12. Not later than March 1st of each year, you have to submit that number, your ADA, to the secretary in the state ed agency so that they can help to determine whether or not you're going to be eligible. So the census typically comes out, before December, but they're giving you time. They're giving you a little bit of an opportunity to say, okay, this is the grant you're desiring to participate in. You have until December 1 to actually conduct it. And then you have until March 1 to submit your ADA numbers, which goes into your eligibility piece. Continuing with that, I want to point out the supplement, not supplant component of this. As with all, especially under NCLB, as with all federal funding, you do have that, you have to be careful that you're supplementing and not supplanting. And in short, again, what this means is funds that are available under that SRSA or the RLIS, the rural low-income schools, you have to be able to show that that funding is going to be used to supplement and not supplant any other federal, state, or local ed funds. I want to break down a little further and go into usage of funding, specifically with the SRSA. Now, in general, we've covered this already. We've covered this part already because it is just eligibility. But we do have to make sure, again, that I wanted to make sure I reminded you of this. In order to qualify and be able to use the funding under the SRSA, your LEA has to fall under these guidelines. Your total number of students in your ADA has to be fewer than 600, or each county in which a school served by the LEA that has a location has a total population density of fewer than 10 persons per square mile. And then the last piece, the school locale code, kind of goes into your PEIMS. So what's important about this, the use of the funding that you receive under your SRSA is only available, and it can only be used per this. Like you won't even be eligible if you exceed that minimum qualifications that's there. And with the RLIS, it's a little different. And again, this is, you're only eligible for subpart 2, that RLIS, if you are not eligible, if you don't meet the eligibility criteria for subpart 1. So with the rural low-income schools, grant funds awarded to LEAs under this part can be used for the following. So this goes into kind of allowable and predetermined allowable usages of the funds. You can use this for teacher recruitment and retention. And it says, including the use of signing bonuses and other financial incentives. 2, teacher PD, including programs that train teachers to utilize technology to improve teaching and to train special needs teachers. 3, educational technology, and that is software and hardware, and what's considered software and hardware is written out and described in Part D of Title II. You can use your RLIS funding for parent involvement activities, other activities authorized under your Safe and Drug-Free Schools program, which we covered yesterday, and then activities authorized under Title I Part A, and activities authorized under Title III. So again, this should remind you of, or bring to mind for you, the coordination of funds pieces, because they're telling you this is predetermined that you can, in essence, coordinate funds with your Title II, as well as your Title IV, and then your Title III and Title I. So having a look at that, how can we make sure that these funds play together nicely and allow me to extend and get the biggest bang for my buck as I can with the funding that I have? Do you have a question about any of the stuff we've covered so far? Because at this juncture, I'm going to go into the program evaluation process, the 5 steps that we see in our general book, and then we'll also go into specific eval requirements for Title VI. Awesome. Let's keep going. So this is the general information for the program eval process. And bear with me if you've participated in some of the other ones, you've seen these steps before, because the process is the process, but there are going to be some pieces in here as we go along that are specific to Title VI Part B that I want to make sure we hit on, because it specifically addresses eval components. The program evaluation process is in the program evaluation booklet, which is on our website, region10.org/Title I, and it's also found on TEA's website. And this is a total, this is on page 6 of the booklet, and it's a total of 5 steps. So step 1 is listing our needs. Step 2, identifying strategies. Step 3, identifying funds. Step 4, reviewing the data. And then step 5, evaluating the impact of the program. So starting off, it says, list the needs identified within your comprehensive needs assessment. As with all federal funding, and really this is not just tied to your federal program sources, this is also tied to your state funding sources as well, because in the Texas Education Code, we are required to conduct a CNA. But within this is the template that you'll see on our site that addresses the CNA process. So we're listing the needs when we're looking at that program evaluation, because we want to be able to say we identified needs in our CNA, we address them in our CIP or our DIP, the improvement plan itself. And now at the conclusion of this, we're having a look back to say, hey, remember these needs? These are the needs that we addressed. This is the backside of the form. The template, as I've said before, is the same for each one of the 8 areas of the CNA itself. You will list your strengths and then your needs. And at the bottom with the summary of needs, we always highly encourage our LEAs in our campuses to list more than just 1 or 2 needs. And part of the reason why, if funding is reallocated within the district, or if all of a sudden you got a community partner and they want to be able to fund some of the procedures or some of the activities that you want to start addressing, it has to tie back to that CNA. So if you only list 1 or 2 things, and those are the 1 or 2 that you are addressing in your improvement plan, it limits you. And technically you would have to engage in that CNA process again if you're now wanting to use this funding to address a need that you don't have listed in the CNA. So we always suggest and encourage that you list, let's say 3 or 4 that you know for a fact you're going to cover this year. And then maybe list, 1 or 2 more. That's more of a, we don't necessarily anticipate being able to cover this because of funding. However, we want to make sure that if we get an opportunity to, then we can address these, and we're going to prioritize these needs based on that goal, on that mindset. Step 2 is identifying your strategies. And of course, you are using the improvement plan, be it your district or campus, to identify the strategies or initiatives that address the program needs and were connected to the federal program. So this is just a screenshot of a general template for the campus improvement plan. Here's another page from that. And you'll see here, you have at the very top, the ideal state or the goal, the objectives, and then strategies and action steps. So based on the CNA, this is the strategy or the action that we're going to engage in to meet the needs that we found in that CNA. Here's the person or persons responsible. Resources, and resources being more than, of course, just time. It's also talking funding. Timelines for implementation of the strategy and action step, evidence of the implementation, evidence of the impact, and then formative and summative checkpoints. Now, one of the things I want to point out here, and I have been sharing this information with a lot of our districts, our Title I school-wide components that's listed here, this far column, we know under ESSA, those 10 school-wide components under Title I no longer exist. And what I mean by that, those 10 pieces are there under ESSA, they're just not packaged as that. They're not called the Title I 10 school-wide components. And there are actually more than 10 now when you're looking at school-wide transitioning. So one of the things we've been recommending for our campuses who are updating their improvement plan templates, I wouldn't get rid of that column because we're still, and we as in ESCs across the state are trying to come up with a nice way to package it, but there still are school-wide components that are required under ESSA for campuses that are transitioning to Title I, be it targeted assistance or school-wide. So I wouldn't get rid of this column because these are there. It's just no longer called the 10 school-wide components. And then another column that you may want to add is going into this 17-18 school year, the TEA has what they call the strategic priorities. So you definitely want to be able to show how each of the strategies and action steps that you are implementing and engaging in and anticipating engaging in for this upcoming year, how they align with the TEA strategic priorities. And if you have not seen them, let me know. I'll forward you the information. The commissioner has been talking about it about a year now, but this is rolling out. This is new. This is what we as a state are going to be engaging in for this upcoming year. And just as a reminder, the 4 strategic priorities that are listed and developed by the TEA, priority 1 is recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and principals. Priority 2 is building a foundation of math and reading. Priority 3 is connecting high school to career and college. And priority 4 is improving low-performing schools. And what the agency is referencing, or who they're referencing when they're saying low-performing schools, it's not, if in my LEA I have 4 campuses that are 90% achievement and higher, and then I have another campus that's at 85% achievement, that's not a low-performing school the way the agency is looking at it. But if locally I want to do things with them to improve and increase their achievement, that's fine. What the TEA is meaning when they're saying low-performing schools, they're talking about our campuses that fall in that school improvement continuum, or that spectrum of school improvement. So I am IR, thinking state level, or I could be identified at the federal level as well. So that's what they're referencing when they say, low performing schools, which is strategic priority number 4. In addition, we have the option as an LEA of being able to create a local option, which was going to be strategic priority number 5. So this is why I would add that extra column next to what was Title I school-wide. I would also add a new column that just says TEA strategic priorities, because you definitely want to be able to show how your strategies and action steps that you are listing in your plan, that your needs that you're addressing based on that CNA also align with the states and the TEA's requirements of the strategic priorities. So step number 3 in the program eval process is identifying the funds. And the requirement is that you identify the amount of funds expended to implement the strategy or initiative, if applicable. And so basically, I screenshot in another picture of the improvement plan, one of the pages, because you will pull funding from here. Next to that strategies and action steps and the person's responsible, resources, as I mentioned briefly in the last slide, that's how much money you spent or how much money you anticipate spending for that program, for that strategy, that specific strategy and action step to be implemented. And if you're including state funding, that should be there. It should say, Title VI in this instance. Or if you're coordinating funds and you're also pulling some from Title II, then Title II would also be listed in that resource box and how much money from those funding sources. If you're doing state allotments, that should be in there. If it's a local funding source, you want to put all that in there, because that's where you're identifying your funds. Doesn't necessarily have to be down to the penny, but a general, this is how much we anticipate spending for this strategy and action step should be in your plan for each line item. And then, of course, another place to go to pull funding would be your fund sources or your budget reports. Now, this is a screenshot of it's not a LEA within our region, but this is a screenshot of an LEA's budget reports in a state. Just pulled it off the TEA's website. And one of the reasons why I have this here is because if you're talking money, then I should be able to pull my budget reports to see exactly how much I spent on which programs and who benefited. So when we're looking at program evaluation pieces to see whether or not it was advantageous for us to participate in this program, to engage in the action or the activity, this is a much needed and really required piece of the funding evaluation for step 3, because this shows me exactly how much I spent. Step 4 in the program evaluation process is the reviewing of our data, and reviewing data identified to measure the fidelity of implementation and the impact of the strategy or initiative on student outcomes. So I have screenshot in, again, another piece of the CNA. This is just the student achievement component, our committee, which is our area, which is one of the 8 that are required. And one of the reasons why I have this here is because your data can come from any of the data sources that you have reviewed there. It can also come from trend data. And this is just a screenshot of a session that I used to facilitate here at the Service Center. I wrote it about 3 years ago. And this is just a reminder that, hey, I can look at my trend data. I can look at my academic data. It just shows me if I am investing money through actions or strategies to meet this specific population's needs, is that being reflected in their academics? Am I able to see that Captain Phoebus here has been continuing to have an improvement in his academic achievement? Other data sources that they're commonly pulled from, of course, are CNAs, as well as our CIPs, our DIPs, your improvement plans, other student achievement data, so it can be benchmark or just locally created assessment data. And then the budget reports, again, I want to see, I've invested this amount of money, does it correlate with stronger academic achievement? Additional data sources that you may want to consider, just depending on what the action or strategy or program that you are having listed in that improvement plan, could be sign-in sheets if you're bringing in more parents and doing some more capacity building opportunities. It could include your results of surveys if you've done some surveys with the families or business community members. It can also include meeting minutes. If during one of the meetings it was mentioned that we want to start doing XYZ program or XYZ tutorials to assist our kiddos, then you can pull that. That's data source that you can use. And this is step 5, which is the last piece of the actual program evaluation process. So I want to make sure that, just as an FYI, it says evaluating the impact. Evaluating the impact and making recommendations for continuation or modification of the strategy or initiative. This here, what you see, is just a screenshot of a heat map. There's nothing special about this heat map. It's just here. I just wanted to show you that if you're wanting to be objective about whether or not our data is working, or not the data is working, whether or not the program, the action, the strategy that we're investing resources, time and funding into is working, it goes back to academic achievement, of course, and it's a nice way of being able to just have a look. This is where we started, looking at the data throughout this process, and now we're looking at it at the end. Was there a significant or a noted increase in academic achievement? So before I go on to the very specific pieces of the program evaluation, do you have any questions for me? Okay, let's keep going. So this evaluation information is specific to the SRSA, which is subpart 1. So one of the things I want to point out from here, the Small Rural School Achievement Program, in order for an LEA to participate in this for more than 3 consecutive school years, because remember, as far as evaluation and eligibility is concerned, at the end of that 3 years, the state has to step back and say, are you making adequate yearly progress? Do we want to continue your participation? Yes or no, or if a complete yes, with some modifications or some caveats. We have to be able to show, us being the LEA, that students that are served have made that adequate progress as defined by the state during that original 3 years. So this isn't a let's wait now and have a look. It's looking at this information during that 3 years. Did our students perform in a way that's going to make our encourage the state to say, yes, let's continue this program with this particular LEA. So after the review of progress on student achievement at the end of that 3-year period, TEA will permit only the LEAs that make that adequate progress in student achievement to continue participating in the program for an additional 3 consecutive years. So once if your students are performing the way, meeting that adequate progress, the way it's spelled out by the state, then you kind of get that gold star. Yay, I can continue, and I can continue for an additional 3 years. And then at the end of that 3 years, they'll evaluate again. So this I want to pull just as a reminder to you all, subpart 2, the Rural Low Income School Program, RLS, the due date for this, and I pulled this straight from TA's website, and I'm going to take you to the site in a moment, but the data from this as far as when it's available, it became available on May 12th, the report, and it's due on August 1st. So let me show you, and this is again from the TEA site, let me show you where you can access it and what it looks like. So on the site, you'll see here the NCLB Progress and Compliance Reports. This tells you what report, when it's available, and the actual due date. Down here, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see the compliance report itself, and then you'll also see instructions for this. So let me show you this really briefly. If you have additional questions about this, contact Becky or I, and we will walk you through how to actually complete this as well. But this is, as with the other evaluation, the ICRs that we have to complete, the compliance reports. This one is specific to your RLIS. I just wanted to show you where you can access it. And then here you'll see the instructions for it as well. Let me take you back to the main site. This is the compliance report for rural low-income schools, so the RLIS as well. This is just a sample, and what you see here is what the report looks like. This in eGrants. It's very similar to all the other compliance reports we have to complete in eGrants, but I did want to show you that if you had any questions specifically about it, oh, and as a reminder, this needs to mirror what you put in that initial NCLB consolidated application, because this is now the conclusion of it. This is now the program evaluation portion. So we want to be able to show that we did exactly everything that we said we anticipated doing at the onset, and this is the result of it. So this is just a sample of what the eGrants application looks like, and this is here on the TEA's webpage as well. So that's all I wanted to show you from this, and then we're going to go back